Frank Dello Stritto talking about movies.
Frank, say hi to Don Daniel.
Don, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. How are you this evening?
I'm fine. Congratulations on getting on one of the best interview shows in the country.
I'm very fortunate.
And that's your show, Joe, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about.
Frank, he's one of the board of directors here at WinCam too.
Okay, well.
Thank you. That's good. No, I need the praise.
Okay.
Hey, Anthony loves what you're doing with his public domain series, so.
Okay.
Mutual Admiration Society.
I appreciate every fan, and I was giving a talk a couple of weeks ago, and a person raised his hand and said, "I bought a copy of your book," and I said, "Oh, you're the one." So I need every fan I can get.
So where was the lecture?
Let's see. It was. My busy season's coming up in October because I show clips from horror movies and all that. But every now and then, a woman's group or a retirement group or some kind of social group needs a speaker, and they find out I'm willing to do it for free. So I went by and spoke to a club on horror movies and how I wrote my books and things like that. So it went well, and I don't seek out the older audiences, but they seek me out because they're more familiar with the movies that I tend to talk about. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to get the appreciation out of the audience when they've never heard of some of the movies and most of the people whose names you mentioned. But it brings back old memories to these people, so it always turns out well when that's the case. Except when I go to, I haven't done it recently, but I used to go to schools. These kids would be like 6, 7, or 8. And it'd be Halloween time, and I'd say, there's movies there's Halloween movies, and there are horror movies, and monster movies, and you'd kind of take them for granted, but it wasn't always so. And then I show clips from the 1930s movies, which I would have been shot in the 1930s because they were considered quite risque for kids. But you can see worse than that every day a week. So they just love the clips of the old movies. I think the whole movie might bore them, but when I show the highlights, then like King Kong on the Empire State Building or the Bride of Frankenstein coming to life and things like that, they just eat it up. And then part of their day is they are forced to write me letters afterwards. So the next day I get about 20 letters from kids telling me what they liked the most. So I always enjoy that. But I'm kind of out of that loop now. I wouldn't mind getting back into it, but I have no contacts in the grammar schools anymore.
Frank, before we get into the Charlie Chaplin series, Dawn does a show called The Know-It-Alls, and they take a public access movie, a public domain movie, and they critique it. What do you think the Know-It-Alls should take on? What good public domain movie?
Let's see. There were some amazingly. I appreciate a little time to do my homework on this, but there's some surprisingly good movies in the public domain. One that comes to mind, I think. You've shown it. It's the Edward G. Robinson, Joan Blondell movie. The one about the artist. I can't remember it. Oh, Scarlet Street. Yeah, you've shown Scarlet Street twice, and I believe another Edward G. Robinson movie, The Stranger, is in public domain, but I'd have to check on that. You've you put me on the spot here.
No, I just wanted it off the cuff. I didn't want you studying, so that's good.
Yeah, we did The House on the Haunted Hill, which surprised me was in public domain.
Good movie.
And the Terror.
Oh yeah.
And what was the other one? We did some really terrible stuff too.
Yeah.
It's fun. We do sort of a mystery science theater thing. So it's
Steve Reeves' Hercules, which I've been trying to get Joe to show, but he always ignores me on that. But Steve Reeves' Hercules movies in the public domain.
All right, we'll look them up. I'll get back to it.
All right.
And what Charlie Chaplin are we watching? We have
6
minutes.
Movies tonight. One is called Burlesque of Carmen. That's April 1915 it was released. And one is called The Vagabond, which is July of 1916. Burlesque of Carmen is, you can flip a coin in the air to find out what length it is. I looked it up online. I believe they shot 48 minutes of film in a cut, but some of the cuts that are out there get down to 31 minutes. And so it's hard to say. I don't know what version you're showing. So it could be anywhere from a half hour to a little over 3/4 of an hour, whereas The Vagabond is pretty steady at 24 minutes. So these were not feature films. These were, by the standards of the day, rather long comedies, because the comedies tended to be one reel one reel, two reel tops, and Vagabond would be two reels, where Burlesque of Carmen was shot as four reels, and someone has cut it down to three. But again, I don't know if you're showing the three or four reel version. Burlesque of Carmen is your audience is going to find a bit weird. It is literally a burlesque of the opera Carmen, which was made as a silent movie a year before and was a common opera. So it was really, the audience was expected to come in there knowing some of the details of the Carmen productions and get some of the jokes. Now, I had to look up what the Carmen story was, and I imagine most of your viewers would too. Basically, she's a femme fatale who drives a military officer to desert and then hooks up with a bullfighter, and depending on which version you watch, people come out happy or unhappy at the end or whatever. I guess the last big screen version was 1948 with Rita Hayworth as Carmen. She's a femme fatale. And Chaplin does not play the tramp. He has invented the tramp by now, but he's a big star, but he's not yet the cultural icon. So he plays something other than the tramp. He plays the military officer in this, but if you changed his clothes, he acts just like the tramp. Whereas the Vagabond is a year later. Every year now, the tramp is becoming more of an American institution. So this is a straight Chaplin movie. Chaplin as the tramp movie. It's 24 minutes. Chaplin usually shot comedies at this time that were a bit shorter, so there's actually two plots in here. There's a long sequence, which is, I think, the best part of the movie. Is some good slapstick and comedy where he's has one of his a lot of slapstick interaction with a band of musicians that is mad at him. And one thing to watch in all these comedies is the physicality of the humor. They didn't use stand-ins. They didn't use trick photography, and God knows they didn't have much time. They were turning these things out in less than a month.
Did they have the stand-ins not invented back then?
Probably not. I couldn't tell you when the stand-ins were, but Chaplin does all his own work. And when you read the biographies of these silent comedians, they were hurt a lot of the time. They were like professional athletes on the Monday after the game. They were sore. They were hurt. We talked about Fatty Arbuckle's scandal last week, and he had been the week before that he had finished filming a movie in which he had to do a stunt with a hot iron, and it was literally him and a hot iron, and he had a big burn on his back, which is why he stayed in his pajamas all day. And of course, when the scandal broke with the sex and all that, they made a big deal of the fact that he was in his pajamas with a silk robe over, but he couldn't stand the pressure from a belt or a tight suit on his back. So that was something these guys lived with. Chaplin wrote, directed, and stars in them. He's basically, even by 1915, he is out of the mode of anybody else directing him, and he's doing it all himself. He's got his favorite leading lady with him in both of them. Edward, I mispronounce this every week, but Edna Purviance. I don't know how she pronounced it. She is a gypsy girl in The Vagabond, and she is the title role of Carmen in Burlesque of Carmen, and she's quite good as a femme fatale. I was surprised because she usually plays good girl roles, but she pulls this one off. The villain in The Vagabond is the Scottish giant that we talked about last week. Rick Campbell, 6'5" compared to Chaplin's 5'5", so they made quite a contrast. And as we discussed last week, Eric Campbell, about a year after this, would come into a hellacious period in his life, and he'd be dead by the end of 1917. A supporting character in Burlesque of Carmen is Ben Turpin, and even people that don't know his name still recognize his face because he was the famous cross-eyed comedian. His eyes were horribly crossed, permanently so, and as a result of some physical humor that he did on stage, he was in a play where he had to cross his eyes for a whole scene, and he played in that for a while, and one day he couldn't uncross his eyes, which he first thought was a tragedy, but then it turned out that's what made him a star. And let's see, this is Burlesque of Carmen, 1915. By 1917, Ben Turpin will be one of the top comedy stars in the country.
And that's our show.
That's our show, Joe. I'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Don, nice talking to you. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Have a great one.
Bye.
The Just a Minute Film Festival is justaminute.tv. I wonder if we can get filmmakers out there to restore some of these old movies, because I'm going to have you back on. We're going to talk about the restoration of these lost classics. But good luck with the film festival this year.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. The views and opinions are ours and not theirs. but I'm glad they got to listen to us. I hope you come back. It's great. It's been an honor to have Don Daniel on.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Jay Gold. Thank you, Judy Kellerman. Thank you, Sean O'Brien. Thank you, WinCam. Good night. How's that? See?